Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Sony Gray and this is From the South, the midday news brief from Telesur English, and we start this new edition right now. The high-level donor conference held by CARICOM and the United Nations on Tuesday raised over $1.3 billion in pledges and just over $1 billion in loans and debt relief for the Caribbean countries that were severely hit by hurricanes this year. One by one, the leaders of the devastated island stood up and explained how precarious their situation is after Hurricanes Maria and Irma. Almost all said the international estimates of the cost of the damage were inaccurate and that the true cost either matched or exceeded their annual expenditure or even their GDP, making reconstruction impossible without international help. With essential industries like tourism ravaged by the storms, in the words of Dominican Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit, the spread of the damage does not permit early bounce back. And we hope to go to Prime Minister Skerrit later on in this newscast, so stay tuned for that. But other news now, with just 4 days to go before the presidential elections in Honduras, another activist has been murdered. The El Heraldo newspaper reports that the body of Jose Maria Discoa, a member of the Opposition Alliance Party, was found on Wednesday morning in the center of the city with blows to his head. His body has been taken to the capital for post-mortem. Two other opposition activists have been murdered in Honduras in the last 2 days. They are Alicia Portello of the Liberal Party and Jose Gonzalez Castillo, a leader of the Libre Party. The authorities haven't determined yet who carried out the killings or why. The murders occurred in spite of the heavy security implemented to protect voters and the electoral material ahead of Sunday's poll. More than 18,000 ballot boxes have already been delivered to voting centers across half of Honduras. According to the electoral authorities, 50 ballot boxes have also been sent to the United States, where over 51,000 Hondurans are registered to vote. As Hondurans prepare to go to the polls, the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez is still being questioned over corruption cases, including those related to the bankruptcy of public institutions. We have more in this report.
One of the most emblematic corruption cases in the current government is the embezzlement from the Honduran Institute of Social Security of over $300 million. Some people say it cost the lives of some 2,000 people. Even though Juan Orlando Hernandez admitted using part of the money for his 2013 campaign, no one was punished for this crime.
I think this administration has no moral right to talk about fighting corruption. This administration admitted they pillaged the Social Security to finance their campaign. And with such cynicism that when people asked for an impunity commission in Honduras, they said they would create an integrated system to fight corruption.
Hernandez's government is also linked to irregular contracts, such as the ones for main roads where now citizens have to pay a toll. The Coalition Against Impunity is demanding an investigation.
The contract for national roads in the country was decided, granted, and is currently operating, especially for the so-called tourist corridor, where the payment of tolls was made obligatory for all people who want to drive on these roads.
For many critics of the Hernandez government, corruption has reached unimaginable levels. The excessive control of state institutions allows a concentration of power and limits the application of justice.
We really are in a political situation in which we've practically lost all institutionality. There's no balance of powers in Honduras. There's a concentration of presidential power in the hands of the President of the Republic.
For others, the biggest act of corruption by this government is the standing for re-election. This is constitutionally forbidden, but has been justified by a modification of a secondary law that set the penalties for the crime, even though such a reform should only come through a constituent assembly.
In the unlikely case that he wins the election, this will be an illegitimate government. It is an illegitimate government that results from a coup against the judiciary when they sideline the Constitutional Court in order to allow re-election. That's when the judicial coup took place.
According to the country's Anti-Corruption Council, Honduras is losing around $450 million every year because of the situation.
The Venezuelan musical group Los Guarararo, who were expelled from Honduras, arrived in El Salvador on midnight on Tuesday. Our correspondent is Ernesto Avelos, has the details.
Nearly a week after being denied entry into Honduras, Venezuelan musicians Eduardo, Luis, Jesus, and José Manuel, members of Los Guaraguao, arrived to Monseñor Romero Airport in El Salvador.
There are people who are afraid of music. We believe it wasn't Los Guaraguao who they were trying to stop, but what our music represents. And well, we have always known that what we chose to do is difficult. Doing what we do has many implications, one of which is some people being against us. But it's what we want to do, and nothing is going to stop us.
Their visit to El Salvador is a part of a Central American tour that was interrupted when the Honduran government made the decision to illegally detain them last Thursday for close to 18 hours, and then had them deported to Venezuela under false pretenses.
We shot a video for the Honduran people, and in that video they sang all of our songs over in Honduras, and that excited us. The Honduran people love us even more now.
Although Honduran authorities denied them entry into the country, the Honduran people in Latin America have shown solidarity with the Venezuelan group.
We go now to Cuba, where the whole country is getting ready to pay homage to Fidel Castro after 1 year of his death. Our correspondent, Laura Prada, tells us more from Havana.
Hello, nice to greet you from Havana. Indeed, several activities will be taking place this coming week here in Cuba, where we are remembering the first year of Fidel Castro's death. These activities will be starting the day 25 of November at the stairway of Universidad of La Habana, here where students will be remembering his legacy and where Fidel himself said that he became revolutionary. After this, the second big activity remembering his life will be held in Santiago de Cuba the days of the 3rd of December, where an evening will take place in Antonio Maceo's Square. And the day after, the 4th of December, a pilgrimage will leave from Antonio Maceo's Square to Santa Ifigenia's cemetery, where the rock that beholds his ashes stands. Since last December, this cemetery in Santiago de Cuba has received the visit of more than 600,000 visits, and of those 125,000 have been people from more than 100 countries. These activities, besides others that will be happening, like the special presentation by the National Ballet of Cuba and some other scientific activities remembering his legacy, his life. This is all I have for now. We'll keep in touch and I'll give you more information about which activities will be happening here in Cuba.
Thank you so much for that report. That's Laura Prada in Havana. And we have more news in a minute, so stay with us. Tuesday's arrest of 6 executives from Venezuela's state oil company marks a renewed effort by the Venezuelan government to root out corruption. President Nicolas Maduro asked the people to support this campaign.
I'm asking for the support of the Venezuelan people. I'm asking for the support of the PDVSA workers. I will get to the bottom of this, and nothing, no one can stop me. I'm asking for the support of the people in this tremendous fight for truth, justice, against corruption, against treason.
Thousands have marched in Santa Cruz to support a change in the Constitution that would allow the re-election of President Evo Morales into his fourth term. On December 3rd, Bolivians will vote for pre-selected judges who can approve a change in the 2009 Constitution, allowing Morales to run for a fourth, fifth-year term. The opposition are pushing for a null vote, saying that the move would be unconstitutional.
We are supporting our president, Evo Morales. We'll continue working for 5 or 10 years. The only thing the opposition do is question the politics of our country. The opposition doesn't have any proposals, any ideas, nothing. Our president has a plan for 2020 to 2025, and he will fulfill all the projects that he has been developing.
Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno has asked the Constitutional Court to support his proposed referendum, which has divided the government party, the País Alliance. The Constitutional Court hasn't yet approved the questions for the referendum, although some assembly members have said they violate constitutional norms, especially those referring to the Council of Citizen Participation and indefinite reflection. Political leaders close to Ecuador's president, however, support the referendum.
Debate is essential to make a positive decision, meeting the deadline that the law set it out. Nevertheless, we think this can be done more quickly than it is now.
If the Constitutional Court approves the questions just as they were sent by the President, we will be seeing the first big attack on our institutions, a soft coup against democracy.
We support the referendum because it's a democratic principle. We will take our final stand once the questions are ready and approved. The only institution that can do that is the Constitutional Court.
The search for the missing Argentine submarine has reached a critical phase, as the Navy is worried about the oxygen levels inside the submarine. The rescue effort for the missing Argentine submarine enters its 6th day without any trace of the vessel. The Navy says if the submarine is unable to rise to the surface, it would be using its last oxygen supply. There has been growing anxiety among the family members of the missing crew over the uncertainty of the vessel, but some family members remain hopeful.
We came to provide support. We have hope, faith that they all will come back. Yes, we have to have hope that they will come back.
A public hearing took place in the Colombian Congress about the impact of coal mining in indigenous and Afro-descendant communities that inhabit the Colombian Guajira. The Wai'u people's leaders remembered that children of their territory are still dying by malnourishment and lack of clean water.
These Wai'u indigenous people made the long trip from Colombia's Guajira region to the capital to denounce the suffering caused by coal mining near their villages. Duber Jose is one of them, who saw his niece die and his baby son suffer lung disease because of coal pollution.
And it's all because of the coal mine we have there. I blame them because it's they who are affecting us with environmental pollution. And it's not only affecting us, but also the animals, the plants, and the water.
Carolina has repeatedly felt her life is slipping away. With time, her breathing problems have grown worse. She knows this is because of the pollution of her land. The coal mining has diverted most water sources and polluted those that remain. The consequences are clear. Thousands of Wai'u children have died in recent years from hunger and thirst.
To be able to drink water, we have to buy it. And that's not fair, that we don't have water, that there's no water for consumption. Our life is ending in front of our eyes. Our children. I have no words to describe how we live there.
A humanitarian mission recently visited the indigenous reserve in the province. Representatives from national and international organizations confirmed the grave reality of life for the Wai'u people, the victims of an extractive model of development that privileges the interests of foreign capital over the lives of indigenous children.
This is an interference by the mining companies in the life and administration of these communities, which damages and curtails the rights of children in particular. but which also affects the rights of the whole community to life and to their survival as indigenous people.
The tragedy these communities are facing in the Guajira is not new, but with time it is getting worse, while the Colombian state and society in general hardly seem to care.
Brazil's lower house is still discussing a proposed constitutional amendment which, if approved, could prohibit abortion for any cause, even those already approved by the law. For Brazilian women, this would be a major setback to their rights.
The climate was tense during the debate in the commission that's analysing the constitutional amendment proposal 181. The principal document that lengthens the maternity leave period for mothers of premature babies was already approved, but it can still be modified. If that law is approved, abortion would be forbidden in any situation.
A law like this pulls Brazil away from having a basic understanding and concern for its minorities, with the excluded ones, because abortion is already illegal. It's already criminalized, and yet it is still performed. We frequently see women going to hospitals, to the general health system, after they had abortions done, not because they want, but because of the circumstances in life.
It's very common that abortions are performed by married Christian women who have a stable life, but unfortunately those who don't have the resources for a safe abortion in Brazil suffer the consequences of badly performed ones, like being left barren or dead. These are mostly black women, poor women from the outsides of cities. To strengthen the laws towards abortion in Brazil is the same as condemning even more women to death.
The digital platform of Us has gathered over 160,000 signatures against the banning of abortion in Brazil.
In Brazil, women die daily after an abortion. So are these women well represented here in the chamber? Are these women being heard today? We don't believe so. That's why we're bringing this petition.
Deputy Erica Coquet from the Workers' Party warned about the severity of the approval of this constitutional amendment.
They want to include in the Constitution the inviolability of life since conception, something that contradicts what's already established in the Penal Code. They also want to include that designation in an immutable clause. And what is an immutable clause? Something that can only be altered by a new constitution.
In Brazil, 135 women are victims of sexual assault every day. If the constitutional amendment 181 proposal gets approved, not even they will have the possibility of a safe abortion.
We'll be back very soon, so stay with us. The Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri has suspended his resignation 2 weeks after he announced he quit the government. The announcement will ease the crisis, which has deepened tensions across the Middle East, and will also offer a brief respite for the Lebanese, who are struggling with the spillover from the war in Syria and a large refugee population. Our correspondent in Beirut, Hibai Arbida, has more details.
Buenas tardes, saludos a toda nuestra audiencia desde Beirut.
Saad al-Hariri, on his return to Lebanon, has continued his role as Prime Minister and not heeded calls to resign. He made his first public appearance after his trip to Saudi Arabia, France, Egypt, and Cyprus. During these 3 weeks, Hariri, as well as Saudi Arabian officials and his supporters, have said that he was never captured and that his resignation came without any pressures. His followers welcomed him as a hero while chanting, "Hariri is free." With situations like this, Hariri said during his appearance that I really know who actually supports me. This was referring to the situation with his political party and those who want Hariri to resign now that he's back in Lebanon. The Prime Minister also said his country will remain Arab, referring to the possible interference of Iran and Hezbollah, despite Hezbollah's leader expressing his support of Hariri as Prime Minister. Let's remember that Saad al-Hariri presented his resignation to the Lebanese president, Michel Aoun, this morning, although he didn't accept it and asked the prime minister to continue his functions for a bit longer, easing a crisis that has deepened tensions in the Middle East.
A key summit attended by Russia's Hassan Rouhani and Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan is underway in Russia to increase efforts to end the Syrian conflict. The leaders aim to reboot the peace process in war-torn Syria. The meeting comes 2 days after the Russian leader hosted surprise talks with the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. Putin has been exploring a Israeli forces entered Palestinian homes, arresting dozens of men and children during a raid in the West Bank on Tuesday night. Our correspondent Noor Harazin has more in this report.
Israel continued to violate all Palestinian-Israeli agreements, not only here in Gaza but also in the West Bank. Overnight in the West Bank, Palestinian eyewitnesses reported that Israeli forces arrested tens of Palestinian men, including minors, during night raids on Palestinian homes in the West Bank. While here in the Gaza Strip, according to the Palestinian Fishermen Committee, Israeli naval forces attacked Palestinian fishermen off the coast of Gaza City, despite the fact that they were fishing inside the 6 nautical miles limit. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, the Palestinian president and the Palestinian officials are getting ready to welcome the foreign minister of Ecuador tomorrow.
We thank Noor Harazin for that report, and now let's take a look at some of the stories making headlines around the world.
Zimbabwe's former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa has arrived back in Harare and will be sworn in as president on Friday. This after Robert Mugabe resigned on Tuesday, just as the parliament convened to begin impeachment proceedings against him. Parliament Speaker Jacob Mudenga confirmed the news.
The Chief Secretary to the Office of the President and Cabinet, Dr. Swanda, is making the necessary arrangements for the swearing in of the incoming president, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa. I am advised that the swearing in ceremony is planned for Friday, 24 November 2017. Details will be provided later by the relevant authority.
The former Bosnian Serb military commander Ratno Mladic was found guilty of genocide by a UN War Crimes Tribunal and sentenced to life in prison. Mladic's sentence was for his role in massacres and ethnic cleansing during the Bosnian War. In July 1995, more than 7,000 Muslim men and boys were killed in Srebrenica, mostly by summary execution.
There's nothing heroic about executing prisoners. There's nothing heroic about forcing thousands of people to flee from their homes. So individuals prosecuted and convicted by these tribunals are everything but heroes, because they have been prosecuted and convicted for not respecting the Geneva Conventions and not because they behaved as soldiers.
The president of Germany is making an effort to broker a coalition deal which might include the Social Democrat Party. The move comes after talks failed between Chancellor Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats, the pro-business Free Democrats, and the Greens Party. If this last push fails, the country will have to go back to elections.
It's just over 5 months since the Grenfell Tower block burned down in West London. It was Britain's deadliest fire in more than a century, and the survivors are still struggling to recover. Last Thursday, the Metropolitan Police released the official figure of the dead as 71. And this Wednesday, Britain's finance minister has promised $37 million for mental health services for the former residents. Many of these are immigrants, and the fire revealed the stark social divide in that part of the country. To discuss this further, we're being joined by Toyin Agbetu of Grenfell Media Watch. Hello, Toyin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Greetings, Sonny. Good to have me. Thank you for having me here.
So, first question, how is the community doing?
The community is doing fantastic, considering all the nightmares that they're going through. They're going through some very challenging situations, and the way that they've come together and actually looking after themselves, and that's what really is happening. They're having to take care of themselves is fantastic, but the situation certainly isn't as it should be.
Well, we just heard that the finance minister has offered £28 million or $37 million for mental health services for the community. Isn't that a good thing?
Well, you see, this is the problem. Yes, the Chancellor's actually made this announcement, but the problems that are being caused with that funding, most of it's going from mental health services. Well, the actual mental health services problems are actually caused by the government and caused by the council by so much of the ineffectiveness of what they've been doing. So as opposed to actually alleviating the trauma, what they're actually doing by leaving people in hotel rooms, leaving them in bed and breakfasts, continuously seeing them every week with no progress, is that they're actually exacerbating the problem. So yes, 28 million may seem like it's a great amount, or $37 million might seem a lot, but when you think that Kensington and Chelsea Council sits on a reserve of some £217 million, they've had the finances to solve this issue. What the government should be focusing on is actually making all the other tower blocks across the UK fire safe. That's the issue. Dealing with Grenfell is a much more complex issue rather than chucking, which in the scale of this particular situation is actually a small amount of money.
And since we spoke about that, because I guess a lot of people would look at that pledge for mental health and think it's a good thing, I need to talk about your organization, Grenfell Media Watch. Why was it so important to create this organization, to look at the media coverage? What were your concerns?
Well, unfortunately, one of the things that happens is that the situation with Grenfell has become very political. So a lot of parties are actually using it to score points, to prepare for the next elections that are coming up. And the idea of justice and actually solving the issues that are faced by survivors today is actually being put to a back burner or being used as a political football. So what we do is simply actually analyse it from an independent perspective. I would say we're like a critical friend, but right now we're just being critical. There isn't much space to actually be friendly, because what we're seeing, unfortunately, isn't actually solving the problem. The police investigation, where they've given this figure of 71 out of nowhere, is actually horrendous, because at the end of the day, one of the things that even the Met Commissioner made clear is that the intensity of the fire, as you can probably see in some of the VT footage you had there, meant that some of the bodies were incinerated. Even the TMO that managed the property didn't know how many people were actually resident inside the tower. So Grenfell Media Watch actually looks at all the information that's in the public domain, and then we sit down independently and come to ideas, talking to residents, talking to survivors, talking to volunteers as to what is really going on and how can we keep this push for justice going when there's so many forces trying to put it on the back burner.
But thank you so much for chatting to us, Toyin, and we are going to keep on keep in contact with you. And, as the situation develops in this critical first year after the fire, we'll talk to you to offer some proper clarity as to what is actually happening and how the community is coping. Thank you so much for chatting with us. We've been talking to Toyin Agbetu of the Grenfell Media Watch, and with that, we've come to the end of this midday news brief. So for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for Tell Us Your English. I am Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.